Anyway, I haven't done a video in a little while. And last week I went to that hands-off march. Took some pictures and a little tiny bit of video. And I guess there were like something like 5.5 million people already, or not already, all over the country who protested, and they just had massive numbers of people in the big cities. And in Medford, the estimates ran 3,000 to 4,000 people. And this is a red area, very much a red area. So it was impressive. And it was, most part, it was uneventful. I guess one of these anti-abortion nutters, I guess he got punched in the face or something, which that wasn't right to do that. And but he went on a rant about how violent everybody was. But everybody was, in his video clip, all these people were concerned about him. You know, these terrible, these evil people were wanting to call an ambulance, offering to call an ambulance, all this other stuff. So anyway, whatever. But anyway, it's pretty clear that more and more people are against what the fuck's going on in the damn D.C. And, you know, it's like a train wreck. You don't want to look at it, but you can't look away. And I don't think Trump was going to make it for 4 years. But the trouble is Vance is even worse. But one of the things they try to sneak through in Congress, what they're in process of doing, is that SAVE Act, which is totally unnecessary. It's supposed to be, there's supposedly all these illegals that are in the country that are voting and all this shit. And of course, it's all bogus. What Republicans want to do, what these wingnuts want to do, is disenfranchise anybody who's suspected of being a Democrat. They've been doing this shit. They did it in the last election. Last couple elections, they've been doing this shit. And they don't even really hide it now because, you know, they're authoritarian. And they don't care. They want a king in there. These assholes that are un-American, why don't they the fuck move out of the United States? Just get the hell out and leave the rest of us alone. No, they can't. So anyway, the House passed it barely. I think it was something like 216 to 214. And since they have to have a 60-vote majority in the Senate, it's not likely to pass. They have to get enough Democrats to sign on, and there ain't enough of them. They can't get 7 of them to do it. So it's kind of a dead issue, but one of the things that the so-called religious right or the Christian Reconstructionists have been bleeding about, and they're getting more and more vocal, and the MRA types, is because, let's face it, most men are absolutely stupid politically and can't admit they're wrong. What they want to do is take away women's right to vote, even though it's enshrined in the Constitution, in the 19th Amendment. They want to take it away. And you'll hear these, like Joel Webbin and Doug Wilson and, you know, all these crackpots that are in the Reconstructionist thing. They don't think women should do anything but be fucked and breed and be little homemakers, wiping ass and waiting on men hand and foot. And women aren't doing that anymore. They're rejecting all that stuff because most men are lazy shits. They're lazy, useless shits. And so they're walking away. They're walking away. Like I did decades ago. And younger women now, they're finally catching on to what a rigged game it is. But these guys who want to take away women's suffrage, they're trying sneaky ways to do it. And what the SAVE Act really is about is disenfranchising women. It's not about illegals. It's not even about so-called transgenders who change their names. It's not even about that. This is about taking women's right to vote. And the way they do it, they chip away at it, is they go after married women because most married women are so damn stupid that they still take on the husband's surname. It's so goddamn stupid. I can't believe women even doing that now. It's all this romantic shit. It's like them going on joint bank accounts. And even though it's all detrimental, it's terribly detrimental. So, and anyway, marriage itself is a crock. But it says here in the cut, it says far-right conservatives, they aren't conservatives. They aren't conserving anything. May not have gotten their wish of ending women's right to vote just yet, but Congress inched closer to that pipe dream when it passed a bill on Thursday that could make it considerably harder for married women and millions of other Americans to vote. And let's face it, women are far more likely to vote Democratic than men. Heaven forbid men ever admit they're wrong about anything. Heaven fucking forbid. The Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act, oh, talk about Orwellian, also known as the SAVE Act, would make sweeping changes to the voter registration process and codify an executive order that Trump signed last month. Every House Republican voted to pass the measure, and so did 4 Democrats. Representatives Ed Case of Hawaii, Henry Queller of Texas, Jared Golden of Maine, and Marie, whatever the hell, Glusenkamp Perez of Washington. What are their explanations for that? Are they that damn dense? The SAVE Act would require that Americans show documentary proof of citizenship in order to register to vote or update their registration. That means they'll need to show a birth certificate, passport, a real ID-compliant driver's license, or some other gold-tier citizenship document in person, effectively ending mail and online registration services as well as voter registration drives. See, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to make it harder for people to vote Democratic. Because Republicans don't have the votes. They don't have the votes. They can't do it. They can't lead. They can't do anything. It's all about filleting the rich and giving them tax cuts. And that's why they're trying to do all this draconian stuff of cutting agencies, is to give the billionaires more money. Bunch of freaking sociopaths. But it says here, the measure also calls for purging voter rolls for non-citizens, which will likely lead to eligible American voters being caught up in the purge. Yeah, that happened, and I'm sure that's what happened in this last election. And what it does, yep. He claims, this guy, that Chip Roy, claims that the measure will prevent non-citizens from voting. That's already illegal. See, it's a crock. And people who violate the law face steep penalties such as jail or deportation. So these cases are extremely rare. You may be wondering, how unusual actually? Well, an analysis of the 2016 election conducted by the Brennan Center for Justice found just 30 cases of suspected non-citizen voting among 23.5 million votes cast in 42 jurisdictions with high immigrant populations. If you can't do that math in your head, that's an infinitesimal 0.0001% of the vote in those jurisdictions. And then voting rights organizations have warned that if the measure were to become law, it could just disenfranchise millions of voters across the country. That's the point. Married women could be hit especially hard by these barriers. About 8 in 10 women in the U.S. change their surnames after getting married. Idiots. And the bill only allows birth certificates, not marriage certificates, as proof of identity. All in all, the Center for American Progress estimates that 69 million married American women have legal names that do not match the names on their birth certificates. And then there's a further problem with not having access to passports, birth certificates, or naturalization certificates. And then more than 60 million Americans live in rural areas, making it harder for them to meet the in-person registration requirement. See, it's all about disenfranchising Democrats. Because they're a bunch of fucking fascists, is what they are. But it won't pass the Senate. That's not very likely. It's going to. That they'll even look at, that they'll even get the 60 votes necessary. But the very idea that they'd even propose this. But it's not about the immigrants. It's about the women. Because women vote Democratic a lot more than men do. So anyway, I will... The New Hampshire Campaign for Voting Rights told the Associated Press that at least 56 people across the state who tried to register the same day as the election, which the law allows, were turned away. Among them were women whose maiden names on their birth certificates and married names on their driver's licenses didn't match, and who were forced to bring their marriage licenses as additional proof of their identity. The SAVE Act now heads to the Senate, where it will need, and it's not going to pass. But even if it doesn't, voters across the country are not out of the woods yet. 8 states currently require documentary proof of citizenship in order to register to vote, and 17 additional states introduced similar measures this legislative session. Disenfranchising voters seems to be the cornerstone of the Republican political project, which raises the question, what are they so afraid of? They're afraid of women. They're afraid of women because they vote Democratic, by far. And so, anyway, and then my other thoughts are the Menendezes. They got, I guess, resentencing or some damn thing. They may be getting out. The Menendez brothers, those are the ones that slaughtered their parents in cold blood in 1989, shot them in the face, at least their mother in the face, while the parents were sitting in front of the TV eating ice cream. And these poor little abused babies, these poor little guys, they were just so abused. They weren't living at home. And they were so abused, they just decided that they couldn't handle it anymore. And they went after him. That was Leslie Abramson, who should have lost her damn law license, as far as I'm concerned. Doing something that despicable as to use the abuse excuse. But it was obvious they killed their parents for the money. They decided they wanted that inheritance because their dad was thinking about disinheriting him because neither son amounted to shit. They were pretty useless. And, you know, he was a type A type to the nth degree, and his sons were type Zs and had no ambition. But they were afraid of being cut off, so time to kill dad and mom and get the money, which they did for a while, and they spent it like drunken sailors. But, you know, Abramson's thing was she knew they were guilty. I mean, they did it. And she was trying to propose mitigating circumstances, alleged abuse, which I never bought that crap, by putting the parents on trial. And she did that so they would not get the death penalty, which I'm not in favor of the death penalty, but I'll tell you, people have been executed for a lot less than what they did. And now they could get out. We've got a lot of these groupies. They've got a lot of groupies. They've always had groupies. These women that had just fall in love with them and sent them love letters and fan mail. And a couple of them, at least a couple of them, married these guys when they were in jail, in prison. And then a couple of years ago, they ended up, one was in one prison in Northern California, and the other was in another prison in Southern California, and then they were finally were moved to the same place so they could be together on Christmases and all kinds of little birthdays and all kinds of nice shit, since they slaughtered their parents. But yeah, that there are time and again there are murders among the rich where somebody stands to get an inheritance, or they're afraid of being cut off, like Dana Ewell, who murdered his family through another person, hired a hitman to kill his family because his dad was not happy with him because, and I remember seeing that article, because Dana had done an interview with the LA Times, and he misled him to think that he was responsible for the success of this airplane thing, that actually his dad owned the business and ran it. but he was taking credit for it, and the dad was very upset. And he was basically, he and the mom, I would assume, said, after you're done with school, you're on your own, buddy. We're cutting you off. And so he freaked out, and he wanted to get that $8 to $10 million back then. Just like the Menendezes, it was around $10 million or so with their dad's estate, dad and mom's estate. But he about had old Ewell, and I'm going to talk about Dana Chandler here in a minute. But Ewell got upset when he found out, when the reading of the will, that he wasn't expected to receive, he wasn't going to get any money for 14 years. What a dumb shit. What a damn dumb shit. And he was 21, so he wouldn't have been able to get any money until he was 35. Dumb shit. As dumb as him having his hitman use his father's ammunition. God damn. And he had a 180 IQ, supposedly. 180 IQ. Dipshit. And then, yeah, and then there was a case that I've been following for years, and that was that Dana Chandler case. And her case was a lot like Betty Broderick's. And, you know, that killed her husband, and, you know, her husband ditched her for another woman, his secretary, and then, and she was had moved on, technically, but she couldn't stand it that he won. She couldn't stand it for him to move on, so she slaughtered them in bed. Same with old Dana Chandler. She found out her ex-husband was planning to marry this other woman, and this was in Topeka, Kansas, and Chandler was in Denver, Colorado, and drove the 8 or 9 hour drive to Topeka, Kansas, and killed them both while they were asleep. And there was a lot of police incompetence that they didn't have enough to go on, enough physical evidence to go on to try her case, so it was put off for years and years. And then they did decide to arrest her. I think it was around 2011 or 2012. Finally arrested her in Oklahoma. And then she went to trial. She was convicted and had two 50-year sentences for each first-degree murder or second-degree, whatever it was. And so that was that. And then she appealed it, and the Supreme Court in Kansas had to throw it out because the stupid prosecutor lied about evidence that they didn't really have. So it was a technicality. She was guilty as shit. I mean, her family knew that. Everybody that knew her knew she did it. But she beat that rap. And then she was tried again, and that was in 2022. And it resulted in a hung jury of, I think it was 10-2, in favor of conviction. And the case didn't have DNA, didn't have fingerprints, but there was enough circumstantial evidence to nail her ass. So anyway, so she was out, or free on that, I guess, or whatever. And so she had a hung jury, and then they tried her again, and just this last month, and about a month or so ago, they reached a verdict of guilty, and this damn fool fired her legal team, and she decided to represent herself, and it was pathetic. Dateline NBC the other day, just a few days ago, had an update on this case, and it was a pretty good report, and it was just pathetic how absolutely off her rocker nuts that she is. I mean, she was like a gift to the prosecution. And one thing they kept out in the previous trial was that eyewitness that was 70% sure in a lineup, and it was a gas station attendant, And they were 70% sure it was her, and she was in Kansas. So the thing was, that witness had died, and it was not admissible in that second trial. But dumbass Chandler introduced it in, representing herself, and so then the prosecution got in there and made hay out of it. See, when something's kept out, there's a reason to keep it out, but if it's introduced by the defense, hey, the prosecution can seize on that. So that didn't help her. And it was all, you know, all that stuff. None of her alibis ever checked out. Nothing. She couldn't really prove anything. That she was even in Colorado during that time period that her ex-husband and his fiancée were killed. That was Mike Sisko and Karen Harkness. And that was back in 2002. And the kids knew that she did it. All his family knew she did it. Just about everybody knew that she did it. And she had a long history of harassment and all this. And Mike must have told her, I think he did, that he was planning to marry this woman. And that just, and she just decided if she couldn't have him, nobody was going to have him. Because she talked about trying to reconcile. He had nothing to do with that. Kids knew she was nuts, everything, and dangerous. So anyway, Chandler, after about, I think NBC said 3.5 hours of deliberations by the jury, and while other media outlets said 4.5. But it was a very short deliberation time. She was convicted. So now she's going to be sentenced in June. And hopefully the same sentence. But the judge, I think it was, allowed her an attorney to appeal the damn conviction. So here's more taxpayer money is going to be paid to try her again. Hopefully not. Hopefully this is the end of it. I feel for that family went through damn hell. The kids that went through hell because their mother was off her rocker crazy. But anyway, I know I've rambled here a little bit, but that's a couple of things that I was thinking about these past couple of days. That SAVE Act, though, the idea that they would even pull that shit as an end run around the 19th Amendment, that is just outrageous. Anyway, my dog is demanding that I get off of here. So that is it. Gosh damn. Okay. I shouldn't be having my name on there. Okay. Anyway, that is it.